Well, welcome everyone to Unhoused and Unscripted, where we dive deep into the real stories and raw conversations about youth homelessness. I'm your host, Joseph Alonzo, and in each episode, we will break down barriers and bring you unfiltered insights to those who live in it, work in it, and are fighting to change it. Join us as we explore the complexities and realities of being unhoused, shedding light on the struggles, the resilience, and the humanity behind the statistics. From personal narratives to expert interviews, nothing is off limits as we aim to foster understanding and inspire action. This is Unhoused and Unscripted, where every voice matters and every story counts. Today I want to welcome folks to the conversation, debunking common myths and misconceptions and stereotypes around youth homelessness. I am joined by Eric Jimenez, our Director of Young Adult Housing here at Cocoon House, and we're going to have this conversation really because it's something that we see in the work. Both Eric and I have been doing this for a long time, and a lot of times some of the first conversations we have with folks are around why young people are homeless. And I think for both of us, it's something we want to talk more about and hopefully educate some folks on some of the complexity that goes on with what leads to a young person leaving the home. So Eric, just let me ask, what are things you hear when you're interacting with folks in the community? What are some of the thoughts that people immediately have around why a young person that Cocoon House serves might have become homeless?
Yeah, I think that one that's very common is two bad choices.
Bad
Or
choices.
bad youth, which I hate that term. I don't think there's a bad youth there or two bad choices. I think there's things that lead to that, or there's many factors that will cause a youth to become homeless. It's not like one day a youth is gonna wake up and say, you know what? Today I'm gonna be homeless. No, there's many factors that will lead into that, and one of those could be generational poverty, right? Where a youth is born into poverty, and that is their, in quotation, like their normal, right? And it's until they start going to school and stuff like that, they start noticing, okay, wait, this is a little different. But that's one of the factors that we see with our youth, that maybe for the person that doesn't work in our field or works with the clients that we engage with, that might be as a shocker of like, wait, what? That is normal? And the reality is that for us, it is. A lot of our youth are born into it.
Right. Yeah, so families that might otherwise be, healthy in their ways of interacting or somewhat healthy. You think about the Seattle, King County, Puget Sound region is one of the most expensive regions in the country to live in.
Correct.
And to be able to afford housing. And how many young people we know that might be living, with their family still, but they might be doubled up, right? You might have a 2-bedroom apartment that's being shared by 2 different families.
Correct.
And maybe a young person trying to go to school, but sleeping in a bedroom with 3 or 4 other people. How do you do your homework? How do you stay engaged in activities outside that are conducive to success? Those barriers start to get stacked up against that young person. So generational poverty, I hear, and I think that's really true. A lot of times families, folks don't know this, but families trying to access shelter, a lot of times you can't take your teenager with you into a shelter. And so we've seen families that have to make the hard decision to ask their teen to find another arrangement while they try to take the parents, or sometimes there's an infant that is allowed in that shelter, and the teen's left on their own, right? We see that.
Yeah, or just the safety concerns within the shelters and stuff like that. Taking a lot of the times the parents that I've had conversations of, like, they're sleeping in their vehicle. They're choosing because the parent has had a bad experience and they don't want to show that or have the youth go through that. So it's like we'd rather stay in our car until we find a resource, right? I think another one is like family conflict.
Yeah.
Right, that conversation, communication between the youth and the family, where a perfect example, something that I see here at our drop-in center. For the people that don't know, here at Cocoon House, we have an amazing drop-in center called U-Turn, where our youth and young adults are able to come in and receive services. But one of the community, or a lot of the youth that come in, are part of the LGBTQ+. And for them, it's that family conflict of like, their values no longer are aligned with their family, right? Or just the family was like, you don't want to be, in quotation, normal, right? So you can no longer be part of the family, or that safety concern of the youth of like, I need to go. Or a lot of the times, what we see is that prevention piece where youth want to come out and they're scared to come out due to that. So I think that's something that we see a lot between the youth that we work with.
So Cocoon House has tracked data on LGBTQ percentages of young people identifying LGBTQ in our programs, and we do trend pretty closely right along with kind of the national average of around 40% of young people experiencing homelessness do identify LGBTQ. And as Eric, you're saying, sometimes it's that youth doesn't feel safe coming out to the family because they grow up knowing how the family's position is on LGBTQ. And sometimes it is the family pushing the youth away once becoming aware. And a lot of times it's out of shame or embarrassment or feeling like they don't know who their child is anymore, right? So those are real scenarios that I know that we encounter. Let's talk a little bit about substance use and mental health. We hear about drug abuse, substance use disorder, fentanyl. It's a major factor in the work that we do. But one of the things that I think gets misunderstood a lot is how there's a perception that a young person becomes homeless because they got into drugs.
Correct.
Right? And I think that the way I think of it, in my experience, most of the time there's an indicator of something that happens where you becomes destabilized in housing. And a lot of times the drug involvement, if a youth has that in their life, comes down the road after the destabilization of housing. And sometimes that's self-medicating, sometimes that is being coerced into drug activity to be involved in other types of unfortunate activities that young people face, such as exploitation.
Correct.
But would you say that that's something that you share that same experience of drug use and even then mental health concerns too, which also spiral post becoming destabilized in housing?
Definitely, I think there's a lot of assumptions that people make in regards to youth being homeless, in regards like, okay, they're definitely using, like they're using drugs or mental health, and the reality, it's not. A lot of the times that gets developed when they're in the streets or when people are targeting them, and they get introduced into the drug use. So if we're able to prevent that before that happening, we will have like less numbers and stuff like that. But the reality is that it's not one of the big issues. I think there's other factors in regards of why youth become homeless. But I think a lot of the times people make that assumption of like, oh yeah, they're, by the way that they look and dress, it's like, oh yeah, mental health or drug use. And the reality, that is an assumption that people are making. And that's why we have this podcast, right? Yeah. To have these conversations and inform people who are learning or who are curious into like learning what we do and of like the different services we provide and providing that knowledge of what we know.
Right. Yeah, I think one of the things that I think is also worth talking about is there's a lot of times an assumption that it's the youth that's, quote unquote the problem, but I think substance use disorder doesn't discriminate based on race, based on socioeconomic status. It's something that affects rich populations, poor populations across the board. And a lot of times I think there needs to be awareness that youth flee situations where a caregiver, primary caregiver or support is having challenges with substance use, and so it's not safe for that youth to stay in the home. There's times where that same phenomenon might apply around a mental health challenge, right? So we have families that are struggling at the parent level with significant mental health challenges. We know mental health supports are limited, and so are substance use supports. So it's not necessarily just the youth that might be struggling with an issue. It might be something happening in the home, and the youth is safer in their mind leaving that home.
Correct. And another thing that I've seen, and I think you talked about this, the resources in different languages, right? I think there's a lot of the times, a lot of the resources that I see, it's tailored to a specific demographic or language. The reality is that our community is very diverse. So we need to make sure that if we are going to have resources or we are going to have some type of service in mental health, we need to make sure that it's different languages, because like you said, mental health and drug use is going to affect everyone, no matter your race or your financial status. It doesn't discriminate. So we need to make sure that we remove that barrier, because clearly that's something that we see in the work that we do with our youth and our families.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to talk a little bit about, so now the young person's homeless, right? And so for folks that listening in, a lot of times what I hear next is, well, then the foster care system should take care of them, right? You've got a young person that, parents are struggling with addiction, maybe there's neglect or some kind of abuse happening in the home, 17-year-old boy, 16-year-old girl, whatever might be the case. The foster care system is designed to take them in and take care of them. How does that really play out?
I've had many clients who were part of the foster care system. So one example is they were part of a house. They were part of the foster care system for a year, 16 or 17, and people make the assumption that just because they got housed right away, they're gonna be given the tools that they're gonna need to be able to get out and be able to obtain housing and employment. The reality is not. The moment that when they age out, they don't have the tools. A lot of times the families are like, okay, well, you turn 18, you didn't get into extended foster care. Okay, well, nice seeing you.
Good luck.
Good luck. And that's the reality. And next thing you know, you have a youth who turn 18 and they don't know what to do. So then they end up into the streets. Others, I have had clients, once again, they're part of the LGBTQ plus community, and they're placed in a house where, the family doesn't agree with that community. So now the youth doesn't feel safe. And due to that, they might run away. I don't want to be part of this because I can't be myself. I just left my other household due to that reason, and now I got housed in this other house where the values are the same as my other household.
So it reinforces that feeling of lack of trust or safety in adults for young people. There's also worth noting, and it's not to bash any systems, but the systems that we have that are designed for supporting young people are overburdened, right? In many cases. So, where a youth might have a situation where they would screen into foster care, there may not just be enough foster families to take them in, right? And so social workers and the state foster care system is overwhelmed with, we've got more young people than we have places to put them. And so youth tend to be, kind of put into these scenarios that are patched together, that aren't super thoughtful around the type of care that they might need, which then reinforces that scenario you were just talking about where the youth might run. There's also times where youth are placed into more institutional settings like a group home or something.
Correct, yeah.
And sometimes that's not the environment that they're going to thrive in as well. So it does start to add those experiences that are not constructive for that youth to then it reinforces the homeless cycle. And so that's something that I think is just for a community perception, needing to be aware that while we have systems in place, those systems don't operate perfectly. And so that's a challenge that we deal with all young people. We touched a little bit at the beginning on affordable housing, and I know, Eric, you spend a lot of work, a lot of time in that young adult housing.
Correct, yeah.
And I just recently became aware of a youth we were serving that was about to age out, right? About to turn 18, and I learned that this youth is living in a Cocoon House program and working two full-time jobs.
Correct.
Because he had been informed or understood what rent was going to cost for a studio apartment, and he was determined to move out and live on his own. Wanted to be able to afford to live on his own, so was working and has to work two full-time jobs to be able to make that happen. And that's a scenario that I feel like a lot of young people are facing, right? And many young people don't have the tools to be able to go to work full-time, let alone two full-time jobs. So this youth is unique, but talk a little bit about how we have young people that have relatively good skill, relatively good ideals around getting out of poverty, but the housing system doesn't doesn't support that from happening.
Yeah, let's look into just the moving costs into getting into an apartment. Sometimes they're asking you for the last month plus the application fee. So if I'm working with a client who, they have a stable job, and sometimes it's the client and their partner. Like they both are working 40 hours. No mental health, no substance abuse, very healthy relationship. But getting them into housing, it's a struggle. One, a lot of the times it's the moving cost. So we're looking into $2,000 for first month, then $2,000 for the last month, plus $2,000 for the application and the background check. So now we're looking into $6,000. So now I'm looking into the client and be like, do you have $6,000 to move in next week? The reality is they don't. So now we need to work with like budgeting or provide that financial piece to be able to help them. Or just even after that moving in, the landlord could increase the rent. A lot of the times we see that after like the first year, they might increase the rent. If they were paying $1,000, landlord could come in and say, okay, I'm gonna double that. And that causes our youth to not be able to afford their unit, and now they're at risk of being homeless or become homeless. Or even just going to the grocery store. Like I used to go to the store like a few years ago and like the $100 be able to buy milk, cereal, your basic needs that you need, right? Now you go into the store and it's hella expensive.
You walk out with 2 grocery bags.
Yeah, I get home and my brother's like, did you only get 2 bags? And I'm like, dude, it's like very expensive. So now imagine our clients who are going through that, like, yeah, I hear you, I see you. It is very expensive. And that's the reality of where we live right now. And giving those tools to our young adults that don't have those tools of like budgeting, right? So sitting down with them and saying, okay, how much do you make? What could you afford? But the reality is, even a studio apartment, we're looking at $18,000, even $2,000 for somebody who's making minimum wage. That is impossible. So then we have to get creative and try to find a solution of like, how can we connect them, right?
Yeah, that's hard. It's hard for for those of us with employment, with skills, and with all the tools that we need. There's challenges that we face, and it's compounded when you're a young person. There's also some ideals that these youth that experience. One, there's a surprise that there's youth homelessness a lot of times because there's youth tend to be a little bit more vulnerable. Tend to try not to be seen, try to fit in. There's a lot of, we know the phenomenon of couch surfing or bouncing around. There's a lot more young people struggling with housing instability that I think the general public sees and understands. But there's also a feeling that homelessness equals dangerous, right? So there's kind of this fear of young people. And, I think I kind of laugh at that a little bit because when I think of the young people I've seen or worked with over the years that even might on the surface appear a little scary or might carry themselves in a way that seems intimidating, it's a mechanism for their own survival. And I'm just wondering if you have any relatable experiences where you have a young person that's presenting in a way of being sort of scary, that what's the truth behind that?
Definitely, I see that every time, when I do the intake, I see a youth coming in, just either tattoos or they have this unique look that I love because they're being themselves. And a lot of the times for people that could be scary. But when I'm doing the intake and I'm getting to, not make any assumptions about the client, right? Because I'm not judging them. I'm able to see, when I connect with them and I make that eye contact, I'm able to see that 5-year-old kid. That kid who's asking for help, guidance, right? And I'm able to connect with that, and I'm able to see, oh my God, this youth has been through a lot. One, they just want to be heard. They want to be able to walk into a space where nobody's gonna judge them or make assumptions or be scared of like, let me grab my phone, let me grab my stuff, distance, and the youth are able to see that I'm not doing that, but I'm able to connect with them and I'm able to just see the kid who's there. And next thing you know, we're like singing to Disney. I'm a huge fan of Disney. So next thing you know, we're like watching High School Music or something like that. But it's, creating that safe place for our clients, right? And not judging them. I have another scenario where I was out in the community and one of my clients walked up to me and I was with my brother. And then my brother was like, "Are you okay? I saw you, I saw that this person, came in and he made the assumption." And I was like, "Oh my God, no, that's like, he's a pretty chill person, pretty calm. Like, let's not make an assumption." And for him, it was that teachable moment of like, oh, I went into alert and I realized that I was judging somebody by the way that they look. And that's the reality of a lot of people do that. But these kids are very, creative, very talented. And one thing about them, Joe, that I love is that no matter what they're going through, they always have a positive outlook into life and they have hope. And that's what motivates me. Because I see them come in through the doors and they come in just seeing us with a smile and then they're like ready to work. Let's take it day by day, and
the
positive energy.
The walls come down, right?
Correct, yeah.
So that's a beautiful story when you can take what appears to be a scary, homeless young person, and you can overlay singing Disney musicals with that same young person. Something, it's kind of magical, right?
It is magical.
And it tells me, and something that I try to reinforce with folks is, homelessness is not a identity, right?
Mm-hmm.
It is when a young person or any person is experiencing housing instability or homelessness, it's a part of what is happening in their life at a given moment, but it's not who they are. And I think that's something that's worth repeating.
Correct.
We cannot, as a community, afford to normalize homelessness. We cannot become numb to youth being on the street and youth having challenges that result from that, whether it's gang involvement or whether it's substance use disorder or whether it's appearing scary and maybe being agitated as a mechanism. We have to, as a community, look beyond that and understand that there's a person here that has hope and aspirations, but that it's a community's responsibility, right? To break down, to dig deeper and understand what it is that is leading to this young person's situation and getting involved. I say this every time. Cocoon House was, we're fortunate enough to sort of be the front line on dealing with youth homelessness in Snohomish County, at least. But it's not our responsibility. It's the community's responsibility, and we have so much community support in doing that. We want to continue to encourage people to get informed and to get involved. I want us all to have, for those of you that might have watched the original podcast with our founder, Sari Gilman, Sari saw a problem and was compelled to take action and was tenacious in taking action, and it led to the startup of Cocoon House.
Yeah.
And what if everybody took that same amount of action to address the things that we see in our young people today? I think we'd have a lot better results. And so, Eric, I want to thank you for digging into this. Hopefully this was informative for folks watching. It's a complex topic, and there's certainly much more we can cover. But we want to thank you for joining us on Unhoused and Unscripted, and we hope the conversation gives you a deeper understanding of why young people experience homelessness and the myths and stereotypes surrounding them. Your support helps us reach more listeners and spread awareness, as I was just talking about. So please stay updated on future episodes, learn more about how you can get involved. Follow us at Cocoon House and visit our website, cocoonhouse.org. Until next time, I'm Joseph Alonzo, Eric Jimenez, reminding you to stay informed, stay compassionate, and stay engaged. Together we can make a difference. This is Unhoused and Unscripted.
But